Today on podcast 34 from Football-Oranje, I, Michael Statham, am joined by editor Michael Bell and writer James Rowe to discuss the new Eredivisie season. We will preview every Eredivisie team, starting with the title race, some surprises of the season, and down to the relegation battle. We really hope you enjoy this special podcast, available on YouTube, SoundCloud and iTunes, where we will still answer all of your wonderful questions sent in on Twitter. Enjoy! Alright then lads, we should start with the Eredivisie title race. We've got so much to talk about. It's going to be really exciting, this podcast. But I think, having talked about Ajax and PSV a bit last time, why don't we kick off with Feyenoord? If we're talking about the title race, are Feyenoord a realistic title challenger? We had a question from Abdul on Twitter. Do you expect Feyenoord to be able to compete for the title?
I do, yes. I think they'll be there or thereabouts. I think with the leadership of Van Persie, with him being captain, and especially helping the younger players and having been there and done it, winning a Premier League and playing for big clubs, I think he will demand a lot of that team and he will try to push them forward. And I don't think they're, of course, El Amadi is gone and a couple of others, but I think they're going to be okay. And I think that with Van Persie's, with his determination, you can see since he's been back at the club, he's so happy. Every time he speaks to the Dutch media, he's got a smile on his face, and he's happy to be home, and he's really enjoying helping and guiding specifically the younger players. And I think he's going to revel in that captaincy role, and I think that Feyenoord will be there or thereabouts.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you look at their form since Van Persie returned halfway through last season, I think their dip at the start is what really killed their title challenge. But after Van Persie came, they improved greatly, ended up winning the cup. And I think if he was there all season, it would have been a different prospect. And I think this year, they're definitely going to be closer than what they were. I don't see them finishing fourth. They're definitely going to be in the top three. And El Amadi's gone, but you've got to look at who's signed. Jordi Klaas's back. That's that. They've managed to keep hold of Jorgensen. They've got Vente coming through. Defensively, they look strong. I think all around, and even they've lost Brad Jones, who might have been a key player, but if you see what Justin Bidrow did during the game against PSV, then they've got no worries for the goalkeeper either.
Yeah, the Dutch Super Cup performance against PSV, 0-0, but final one on penalties. It was great to see Bilo come through and make some great saves in the penalty shootout. I just think that the little things like this are what may hold Feyenoord back from winning the title. I think top three is a certainty. I think you both may agree with that. They finished fourth last season, and the next logical step is to head back into that top three. Gio van Bronckhorst has been great since he took over at Feyenoord. He's won 5 competitions in the 4 years he's had in charge. If that's not a sign of a great manager, I don't know what is. Admittedly 2 Dutch Super Cups, but a league and 2 Dutch Cups in there. If he can get to Europa League group stage this season, that would be another good achievement. But just being in the run with a chance of winning the league would be marvellous. But I think what might hold them back is they have got a 20-year-old goalkeeper in goal. They have got two first-team centre-backs that are ageing. They're a bit slow. I think the full-backs are young and a little bit untested at this level, so we'll see how that goes. Jordi Klaas, he flopped to Southampton, didn't get the games in Belgium. Coming back to final, will he refine his form? And I just think you're relying then too much on the likes of Nicolai Jorgensen, Robin Van Persie to be fit and then firing and scoring at least 20 goals over the season. Of course, keeping players like Jens Toornstra, Steven Berghuis, that's really going to help them. But do you not both think that they're just going to fall a little bit short of first place?
Just a little bit, yes. My personal prediction is they'll finish second. And I just, like you said, a very good point about the Europa League if they get through. They play Dresden in the qualification rounds. I interviewed centre midfielder Desle Ubink for Football-Oranje back in January this year. So that will be an interesting qualifying round this Thursday where the first leg takes place. But I think it'll be interesting to see how they get on if they qualify for Europe and if that will take a little bit out of them.
James, it's interesting how you say that Feyenoord finished second. So who do you think are going to be their main challengers for first place?
Ajax.
And why?
Because I just think the pressure's on Den Haag. He knows he has to win. I think they've done ever so well to keep, at the time of speaking, De Ligt and buying Dusan Tadic, who they wanted before when he was at FC Twente, but they couldn't manage to get hold of him. And Daley Blind coming back as well. And having watched them live, okay, it was only against Sturm Graz so far this season, but they look confident. Huntelaar, although he missed chances in that game, was a little bit too eager. But I think that the base is there for them to really mount a challenge, and to not have won any trophies for 4 years, and the uncertainty at board level, that hasn't helped. And there appears to be stability now. And obviously Ten Hag has been there a while, and you see about De Ligt saying about even the training sessions are really, really helpful, and he learns an awful lot. And I just think there's such a nucleus there that they can really mount a challenge. Yes, they're making progress in Europe with they could face Standard Liège over 2 legs, which I think they'll come through. And then you've got a Champions League playoff round. But although they're secured of European football, which is good, but I think they'll be going all out to win the league, and I think they'll have the quality to do it.
All right. So that's a fair challenger for the title. So what do you think about PSV? Are they going to be as close to Ajax and PSV?
I think yes. If you look at the squad, I think they've got a bit more killer instinct than Ajax do, and I think they've got a bit more. But now they've managed to keep hold of Lozano. He's their key man for this season. I think he'll stay past August. Him, De Jong, and Bergwijn up front is probably the best. I think killer top 3 in the Eredivisie has got to score the most goals of anyone. I think they've added well to the flanks. They've lost Arias, but they've got Dumfries, who's an assist king. They've got Angelino on the left hand side, who's an absolute amazing crosser of the ball as well. And these 2 people are perfect for someone like De Jong, who, for me, is my prediction to be top goal scorer this season, because he's just going to get so much service from the wings that he's going to get so many chances. If he scores them, then I think PSV then become, once again, for me, favourites for the title. It's theirs to lose, really. I think Ajax and Feyenoord have to challenge them. They're still the strongest team in the league, for me.
Yeah, and ultimately that's why I think that it will be between Ajax and PSV for the title. I think Feyenoord will just fall a little bit short of the quality that's demanded to win the title. Can they win game after game after game as the months go on? Van Bronckhorst has shown that his teams are capable of 6 or 7 games in a row. He's even won the league doing that, but they've also gone through periods of losing games in a row, and I just wonder whether that's going to hold them back compared to a team like Ajax, that as long as Ajax can keep their feet on the floor, they can win almost all of the games this season in the league. The nucleus that you spoke about is ultimately what will win them the league. They have got these strong players through the core of their team. Players haven't left. You've got players such as Neres, De Jong, De Ligt, all these young players that just stay with the team because they know that it's beneficial for their development. I think seeing players such as Dusan Tadic, Daley Blind coming back to the club, it's just going to really persuade them to stay and think, I can really kick on here and get another good season under my belt in the league and in Europe. And it will get them that bigger chance for next summer. We always speak about if you're a good player, you're never going to be forgotten about by the bigger teams. And I think that's what's happened there at Ajax. And winning the league will be a big thing for those players and something they can definitely put on their CVs. As for PSV, I disagree with James. I think that PSV will be second. Because they have a little bit more than Feyenoord, like I spoke about with Lozano. He will stay, by the sounds of it. He's given those positive messages. But whether or not Van Bommel can get him to click is the question. That's what will hold PSV back a little bit. But I think he will. I think he'll get the best out of these young players, which he knows already, having managed the under-19s. And we'll see how that goes, really. It's going to be tricky to see how all 3 clubs handle European competition as well. We had a question on Twitter from Ajax Amati, one of our regular listeners. How will Ten Hag manage current players to play successful, both in the Eredivisie and the Champions League qualifying? Well, I think he's got the basis of that squad there, all the talent that's around him. Do you guys not think that Ajax are surely favourites for the title? But if it's not going to be Ajax, then who is their closest challenger going to be, and why? Why Ajax might not win the title?
I think it depends on European commitment. I can understand both valid points you've both made as regards to PSV, but I maintain that Yes, it's nice for Van Bommel to return. Yes, they have a quality in-back squad, but I think it's a little bit naive. It's just my personal opinion. It's a little bit naive to think that someone who's had primarily assistant manager posts and had a short spell managing the under-19s can make the step up to the first team and win the Eredivisie title in his first season. I think that may well be a bridge too far. I don't doubt that Van Bommel will eventually go on to be a success. I don't doubt that should he stay at PSV for 2 or 3 years that he will win them at least one league title, but I can't see him winning in his debut season. I think should Ajax progress in Europe and carry on, and you don't know who's going to qualify yet, and things are a little bit up in the air. But I just think with Feyenoord as well, that you do make a good point, Michael, that it is ageing defence. But with Klaasie coming back, he's got a point to prove. Tonsela is always, he seems to be so consistent. He was very consistent last year. And I think the nucleus of Feyenoord will know themselves that they will want to mount a challenge. And it's a long old season, as we know all too well. So I think it's going to be very interesting. But my prediction for the top 3 is going to be Ajax champions, Feyenoord second and PSV third.
I mean, for me, the reason I think PSV are going to win it is because it's the same as last season. They come up sometimes short, Ajax, and they get frustrated in games and they end up drawing 0-0 with some of the little teams who park the bus. The big worry for them is they've got the strongest, on paper, the strongest squad and so many talented youngsters. But if you look up front, Huntelaar he misses so many chances. I know he scored twice against Sturm Graz, but he also missed so many easy chances. And then you got Kasper Dolberg, who's not been fit all last season. He's not fit yet this season. He wasn't exactly on form last year, so the big worry for me is up front. And I think sometimes if, say, Ziyech does leave, and I think he's still their key man, and I think he still will go. I mean, there's reports now that he's available for 23 million, which is an absolute bargain in my opinion. But if he goes and you lose him, then I think sometimes you just come unstuck against some of the small teams, and it's a way of trying to find some spark to find them out of these tricky situations. I think being such a young squad, they sometimes come unstuck, and I still think defensively as well, they're always got a mistake in them. Especially like Onana likes to play these little tricky on a ball moments. You saw him make a big mistake in the Champions League as well. I think defensively they're not as strong and it's not as rigid as PSV going into the season. So for me, I've got PSV just winning it from Ajax and Feyenoord a very close third. I think it's going to be a very, very tight title race this year.
I definitely agree. But my order of the top 3 is again different to yours, Mike, and yours, James. I've gone with Ajax to win the title, PSV second and final third. I will say, though, that it was neck and neck between me choosing between Ajax and PSV. They are that close in terms of resources, quality of 4 players. But I do agree, Michael, that defence could make the difference for PSV. But at the same time, the attack could make the difference for Ajax. It's really hard to call. And I may also agree as well with Luke de Jong perhaps being top goal scorer this season. It could also go to Hirving Lozano, having been close last season. That's really tricky to predict, and I think we could yet see someone further down the table score plenty of goals. And speaking of which, question of Abdul to ask you guys. After the poor start of RZ, do you think they can still perform the way we did last season? And as you can tell, neither of the 3 of us have predicted RZ to be in the top 3. I think we can all appreciate as well, those that are listening, that the teams below may not have the resources to compete with the top 3. We did see RZ finish 3rd last season, just ahead of Feyenoord. So what this season then for RZ? Will they finish anywhere close to the top 3? Will they perform as well as they did last season? Considering they've lost Wout Weghorst and Alireza Hanbach, their 2 best players, to Wolfsburg and Brighton respectively.
I mentioned in our last pod that should they lose to Kairat, that it could well set the tone. And I believe it will in the early part of the season. But I still think with the quality in-back squad and the experience of Van den Brom, I can see them finishing 4th. But I don't think it will be... I don't think they'll be near the top 3. I think there'll be a bit of a point gap between 3rd and 4th. But I think they'll start really, really slowly, because they really believed in the second leg, and especially the manager Van den Brom believed that the quality would see them through, and that they would go through. This is a team that harboured ambitions to go on to reach the knockout phases of the Europa League, and they didn't get past the first hurdle, so it's going to be difficult for them to accept. It will take a while for them to get over as well. I think we can see them starting very slowly. I think we might see them drawing a few games, and I think that they'll eventually move on from that, and I think they will go on to finish fourth.
I think on paper they're definitely the fourth strongest team in the Eredivisie, and they lost to Kairat. It's one down to, you could say, an absolute horrible referee decision, because that penalty was never a penalty in the second leg. But you also got to look at the weakness up front that they had. Fred Friday, who I was very vocal about on Twitter, should never be playing in an AZ shirt ever again. But Bjorn Johnson will come into that. You've got aging defence with, Hazidiakis is only 20, but you've got Ron Var next to him. And Ron Var was horrible on both legs. I think he's not got the legs anymore. Anyone that's got a fast striker can get past him pretty easily. It's all about them getting their injured players back. I know Stein Voitens is out. He's a big player for them. Marko Vujinovic come back into midfield, and more importantly, Calvin Stengs on the right-hand wing. I mean, they've got the talent to come through and challenge the top three. It's just, if these players that come back from injury can gel into it, and it's all about Bjorn Johnson up front as well. If he can find his Ado Den Haag form up front, then maybe they can challenge for the top three again, but I just don't see it. I can see them getting beat once again by all top three teams who are just superior all around to them.
Yeah, Michael, I did see your interesting comments about Fred Friday on Twitter. Very truthful as well. He's a very limited striker, and I'm very glad that RZ finally got hold of a new striker, Bjorn Janssen. See how he gets on. I'm looking at RZ's opening fixtures here. They play against NAC Breda, Emmen, Vitesse, Heracles. 3 out of those 4 teams they should definitely be beating. But then if they get off to a slow start, like you say, James, and I do agree with you that could be an issue in terms of confidence in the players. After those 4 games, they then face Feyenoord, Groningen, PEC Zwolle, Ajax, Utrecht. Really tough 5 games. 5 teams who I can see within the top 8 next season. And then if after 9 games they have very few wins, it's going to set the tone for a long old season. Knowing that they're not going to reach the top 3 again, it's going to affect the morale of the players. But we are going to see some really great development from some of their younger players still. We always speak about Calvin Stengs on Football-Oranje. Him and Milan Boadu, 2 forwards who are really going to rock the Eredivisie this season, especially towards the second half of the campaign. They're going to be really standing out, I think. But I agree with you both that RZ will be close to the top 3, but there will be a bit of a points difference. So let's go back to our top positions then. So we've gone through our top 3. Are we all in agreement that RZ will finish 4th, or will there be a surprise in there too? Who are our 4th and 5th place teams then?
My 4th place team is RZ Alkmaar. 5th place team is Vitesse. I think with Vitesse, with Matavs and Brian Linssen and Van der Werf as the defender. Slutsky as well. I've been watching a couple of his press conferences since he's arrived, and he's made it quite clear that he viewed the Netherlands to be a fantastic place to start his European career. He was really complimentary about the league and about the challenges, and I think there's a nucleus for Vitesse to go on and do similar to what they did last year. I think they will miss Mason Mount because he had a tremendous season last season, but I fully expect Brian Linssen to kick on. And Football-Oranje listeners and readers will know how I've rated him ever since his Venlo days. And I really hope he gets capped. Because I know we discussed this on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, Michael, where you said maybe he has to make a step up first before he can be capped. But surely with friendly games coming up and how dangerous he's been in terms of goals and assists for Vitesse, and you even saw in the Europa League qualifying rounds, that goal he scored to get them back into the tie, I can't see no reason why he can't be called up, not necessarily for a qualifying match in the Nations League, but they've got a friendly coming up against Peru, for example. And I think it would send out a tremendous message going forward, same for Dumfries as well, that players are not forgotten about by Koeman, and that players that are still playing in the Netherlands that are doing really well for their clubs, if they're selected by Koeman every now and again when he deems fit and he brings them along slowly, it will give them all such confidence, and it will help the league, and it will help the standard of the Eredivisie, and it will help the players to believe that they're not that they're not cut adrift in their own country for being looked at to eventually play for the national team.
I think for me, I totally agree with James. I think AZ finished fourth, and the closest challenger to them is Vitesse. I think mainly because they've now got a coach who is experienced. I think Henk Fraser came under a lot of criticism last season, and it was a bit poisonous towards the end of his campaign. I think they're all just waiting for him to go. Slutsky got announced. The players weren't really playing for him anymore. It's a fresh start for them. My only concern for them is if Matavs gets injured, they have nobody to back him up. Luke Castaños is gone, and they're not really signing a striker. They've got Thomas Boytink, who's young, 17, 18-year-old who's highly rated. He was linked with the biggest clubs in Europe when he was 15, 16, but it's a bit difficult if relying on him to be a second striker going into the Eredivisie season. So it depends. Still 3-4 weeks to go until the end of the transfer window in the Netherlands. They could pick up another couple of players from Chelsea. But I think overall on paper, I agree with Winston, Matavs and Roy Behrens. They've got a really, really good experienced front three that I think can help them challenge for the top 4 or 5 spots.
Yeah, really fair point there about the quality of Vitesse and the quality of the manager. I do agree. Vitesse have got another striker behind Matavs. They signed a 24-year called Oussama Darfalao. But again, reliability about that signing. Signed from the Algerian league, so who knows about the quality of him, and who knows about the quality of the rest of their players. I haven't actually got Vitesse to finish in the top 5. I've got them down as 6th. Although they have signed some good players. Lots more for their squad. It'll really thicken it out with European competition to come and attempts at the cup competition. Rasmus Thelander, the Danish defender. They've picked up Max Clark from Hull City, a very promising 22-year-old. They have signed Matus Berro from Trabzonspor, Turkish team. Hilary Gong is a very promising 19-year-old on the wing. Darfalao up front. And a couple of other younger players around that. Let's see how they get on. But I actually have Utrecht to finish 5th. They did well last season. Erik ten Hag left the club. But Jean-Paul de Jong stayed at the club and took over, having been assistant. And he kept up that strong performance, that really consistent performance every week. And they did do particularly well, especially at home. They were a real force to beat. And their signings aren't too bad either. That's why I've picked them down as 5th. Yaris van Overneem from RZ. We spoke about him in the past. Simon Gustafsson, the midfielder from Feyenoord. He was really good on loan at Rode JC last season. And Gavori as well, the left wing back from the French second division. But he really was a standout in that league. Guvara from Werder Bremen. And last of all, Bergström, the centre back, Swedish centre back. A very good signing again, considering the teams that were chasing him were teams that are playing in Europa League, Champions League competitions. I just think they'll pip Vitesse. I think it will be close. I'm not saying sure that I know that Vitesse will finish 5th. But yeah, I just think over Vitesse, if Vitesse get to Europa League, then they'll want to try hard in that competition. If they don't reach that, then Slutsky might fancy a go at the Cup. And I think it might take it out of their squad. They don't quite have enough players to deal with it. I think there's too many youth players around Vitesse's first team players to keep a strong starting 11. And as James said, if Linssen, who's a great player, but if he doesn't perform, or if Vitesse doesn't perform, then they're left without the goals they need to win games. But that's just my opinion.
The only thing with Utrecht, I would say, is they don't really have a genuine goal scorer. I don't think Dessers has done well, or as well as they thought he would do since he signed. They've got Lucas Gortler and Gerano Kirk and Makianok as well. They're two big target men, and sometimes they play Gerona Kirk through the middle as well for his pace. I don't think any of them are going to come close to the amount of goals that Matavs will score this season. I think that's the only thing that can hold them back. But overall, they've got a strong squad that's very experienced. You got to add Irby Emanuelson still in there, Willem Janssen still in there. I think they'll challenge definitely for European spots. They'll definitely make the European playoffs. But I think Vitesse are slightly better if they get their full strength team out week after week.
All right, fair enough. But lads, let's now look at some of the more surprises of the season. Is there anyone that will be around about mid-table but could finish around the top 6, 7, 8 positions that you might want to keep your eye on?
Yes, I think that NAC Breda are going to do very well. You selected Mitchell van der Gaag as your manager of the year last year, Michael, and with a better squad at his disposal, and a squad that had good players anyway, and didn't really struggle to stay up in the end. They always had enough in the tank to stay up. I think he'll galvanise them even more, where I can see NAC Breda finishing possibly top 10, pushing towards the top 8. I'm not saying they're going to reach it, but I think if you look at the shoestring budget that he had at Excelsior, and they used to pull off on a regular basis victories, especially in away games, which nobody expected, and he galvanised that squad. He's also got a lot of experience managing in Portugal, which people forget about. He managed Bell and James, and I think he got them promoted to the top league in Portugal as well. And he's he's a very, very good manager. I think with a better squad at his disposal, you know yourself as well, Michael, having been to watch NAC Breda, the home advantage and the crowd really get behind them. I think they'll have a very good season where I think NAC Breda will finish top 10, and they may well push, and they won't be too far away from the potential top 8 place.
I actually have NAC Breda to be one of the teams that struggle at the bottom for me. I actually think last year they relied a lot on goals of like Thierry Ambrose. They had Manu Garcia pulling the strings for them in the midfield. I think the players they got on loan from Manchester City, of course it's still very early, they could still get more, but I think the Manchester City players they had last year were a lot more experienced and a lot more talented than the ones they're getting this summer. The pre-season results haven't been great, and there's a few decent youngsters coming through. I know Sidney van Hooijdonk and Jordan van der Haag are coming through, but I actually think overall they're going to struggle this season. For me, the team that can challenge top 8 is PEC Zwolle. I think transfer wise they've had one of the best transfer windows of any team this summer. They signed the duo from VVV Venlo, Clint Leemans and Vito van Krooij, who were excellent last season. They've got Mike van Duinen up front, very experienced, and another few youngsters. They've got Zian Fleming from Ajax, the striker turned midfielder who was captain for young Ajax at times last season. He scores a lot of goals from midfield. Dal Lackman, the centre back, very experienced, played in England. Kenneth Pal, the PSV left back and midfielder. I think overall they've strengthened their squad tremendously this summer. They've got a good manager and they've got big ambitions to finish in the top 8 year after year, and I think they're going to be a surprise team this year. It's not really a surprise if they finish in the top 8, but I think they can challenge the Utrechts and the Vitesses this season.
Interesting comments from both of you there. I've both finished more mid-table. NAC Breda I've had 13th. Mitch van der Haag is going to make that difference, James, like you say. A fine manager, and yeah, the home advantage does really help this team. The supporters are amazing. But I'm not quite sure about the quality of their loans, like Michael says. There's a bit of a doubt upon that. But I think they'll be fine mid-table. As for PEC Zwolle, I have them down as 8th, just to slip into those European playoffs. I think they're actually better than the rest of the teams I have below them in the table. Just a bit more quality about them. Van Krooij, Leemans, 2 great midfielders, and we'll just see how they get on. Quite an ambitious side as well. They had a bit of a slip towards the end of last season, but if they can refine that form, they haven't lost a lot of players from last season. Philip Sandler's gone, but apart from that, the squad is mainly intact. I myself I've gone for FC Groningen to finish 7th. I think if they've kept Mimu Mahi, their best player, and new manager Danny Baus. He's really made a good feeling around the club, and also signing Richard Doan on a permanent deal. I think you're going to see some younger players that are going to reach their prime this season. Doan and Mahi are 2 examples of that, where they're going to have a very good season and perhaps look for a transfer at the end of this campaign. That's why I have them down as 7th, but not to challenge the likes of Utrecht and Vitesse. But I think a much better season than last season, where they nearly finished in the bottom 3.
I think as well, I think you make some very good points about Groningen, especially with Danny Baus, Michael. I've not so much in terms of position, but there's two clubs I wouldn't mind talking about as regarding the question that I think are going to do very well. The first one is the Graafschap. I think they're going to survive without any difficulty. I recently interviewed the manager Henk de Jong, and he was telling me about they have a plan in place to survive in the Eredivisie, and how much they value entertaining supporters, especially at home, and that they really want to galvanise the home crowd and to push them forward and to be the 12th man. And he's a character as well with his experience in the past with Cambuur Leeuwarden, and he managed to keep them on an even keel when they were in the Eredivisie, and they had good results as well. So I think with the experience of Henk de Jong, I think the Graafschap will be absolutely fine. Another one is for debutants FC Emmen with manager Dick Lukien. I recently interviewed Timo Letschert, who plays for Sassuolo in Italy, and he was telling me about when he was in the youth at Groningen, and he wasn't a bit undecisive about his best position. It was Dick Lukien that convinced Letschert that he could become a centre back in terms of positioning, in terms of quality. And Letschert was also telling me about that. Dick Lukien is a great people manager. And I think everybody's brought into the ethos of FC Emmen being in the Eredivisie for the very first time, and I think they're going to surprise. I also received a nice surprise this week. I've received an invitation from the club to interview him, so I'll be speaking to him personally in the next couple of weeks, which will be nice. And I think both the Graafschap and FC Emmen will be fine in the Eredivisie, and I actually think both of them will stay up.
I think one other side that I hope does very well this year, because it's packed full of Dutch youngsters, is Heerenveen. They've had a very difficult pre-season. They lost one game, I think it was 8-1, 8-2 to Hoffenheim. They've got a new manager who's come in, Jan Ode Reukering, who didn't do very well when he was in Turkey last time out. But you got to look at their squad, and they've got so many young talents coming through. Kiek Perry in defence, you've got Michael Vlap in midfield. Up front, you've got Sam Lammers. I really do hope that all these players kick on, and I've got them finishing in top 10. I think if they can gel, the young players come through and make a name for themselves, then they could do very well this season.
An interesting point about Heerenveen. I have them as one of my strugglers. I have them in 11th. They still have some decent enough players to finish in mid-table, away from the bottom three. There could be dodgy times during this campaign, though. The new manager, for me, doesn't set the world alight. As you say, he struggled in Turkey in his last job. Signings haven't been the best. Konkalo didn't do that great at Doncaster, as you said in the last podcast, Mike. Sam Lammers, on loan from PSV. It's just an unknown quantity at this level, whether he can perform or not. I've had my doubts since I thought last season, 2 years ago, he was a very good young player, but now I'm seeing him play more first-team games. I'm unsure about his qualities at Eredivisie level. And also the replacement for Denzel Dumfries, the revelation at right-back last season, is Shell Floranus, who is still young, but hasn't shown quality again at Eredivisie level. For Sparta last season, he was the replacement for Dumfries, but I'm not sure he's really taken it by the scruff of the neck and made his position. So I'm not keen on Heerenveen's defence. Dirk Schmidt is one at right back, and I just think he's become a bit of a scapegoat for Heerenveen's friendly results. They lost 8-2 to Hoffenheim. They also lost 3-1 to Levante the other day. It was Levante's first team. You do expect Heerenveen to at least give them a good match. And even though it was a friendly, it's the last friendly before the start of the season. You'd think that they'd want to impress the fans that may have seen their 8-2 defeat to the German side, Hoffenheim. They didn't turn up, and fans weren't happy on social media, saying that this isn't the team they want to see this season. It's going to be mid-table at best. This team won't finish in the top 8 because of the quality of the players they're seeing on the pitch. The defending isn't the best. They're having doubts about Kobayashi midfield. Morten Thorsby, he's not the goal-scoring 10 that he was in the past. So we'll just see how they get on this season. James, you mentioned FC Emmen and De Graafschap, two promoted teams. I think if we're turning our attentions to the bottom three this season, the strugglers, Emmen are going to be down there struggling, but I do have them down as 14th. I think they'll survive, purely because it is their first season in the league, and I think the players and the fans and the manager are really going to feel that and it's just the whole spirit of the club. It does make a difference to just survive because of that. Some of their players they've signed as well aren't too bad, and I think compared to the other two teams, Fortuna Sittard, De Graafschap, they have the better summer signings. I have unfortunately put Fortuna Sittard and De Graafschap in my bottom three. I don't think they've quite got enough, but we'll soon see. And I have been surprised so many times with the new promoted team staying up because they will just surprise. And I won't be surprised if it happens again at all. But purely because of my lack of knowledge of the two clubs, I feel, then I can't give them a higher position in the league. What do you two think about the bottom three? I haven't given my third team yet, but I'm interested to hear what you guys have put as your bottom three. My
bottom three are to finish bottom Fortuna Sittard. Yes, they're back after a 16-year absence, and that's they're excited about that and they're looking forward to it. But they've recently had financial difficulty in recent years to actually keep themselves solvent. That they're still actually a football club. So I think they're just going to go along for the ride, and I think they're going to do their best. I don't think they'll be cut adrift where they're going to be the worst team in the league at Cancer. I just think this step up is going to be too much for them. And then finishing above Fortuna Sittard, I have Excelsior Rotterdam. They have the club physio of 25 years, Adrie Poldervaart, in charge, and the squad it's not a terrible squad. There are some very good players in it, like Luigi Blauens, for example, and Captain Koolwijk. But I think they're going to struggle, and I think they'll end up in the relegation playoffs. I think they may well go on to survive, but that depends who they will play. And my final spot for the relegation playoffs is Heracles Almelo. It might be a surprising choice, but I think their choice to appoint a German manager who has no experience of Dutch football whatsoever, and they've appointed him on the basis of the good work he did at the German FA in a regional setting. And we touched on it with Heerenveen and other managerial appointments. I think the pace upon which all the vacancies were filled in the top division, was a frenetic pace, and I think that some clubs may well come to rue their decisions at making their choice far too quickly. I obviously respect your decision regarding De Graafschap, Michael, but having actually spoke to Henk de Jong as well, and knowing of his experience with Cambuur and what he has to offer being a great people manager, I think De Graafschap will finish around about maybe 14th, 15th, and I think they will be fine.
For me, I might be totally wrong in this, but I've actually got Fortuna Sittard finishing mid-table in 13th. I think if you look at the actual summer signings, they're actually been quite decent. Andrija Novakovic was a revelation last year. I mean, he came through Reading, signed him as a youngster. He's from America. He's actually an American international. He played for the national team. He was on fire last year for Telstar as they just missed out on promotion. They've signed him up front, and they've also got a very talented striker in Alessandro Semedo as well. Two very good forwards, and I think out of all the promoted teams, they've actually got the best attack out of all of them, and I think they'll actually be alright. For bottom, I've actually gone for Excelsior. I think they've done so well with the club that they are, the budget that they've got, and they're so tiny to stay up over the past few years, and I think Mitchell van der Haar was a big part of that. He got them up. He got them staying there, but I think this year is the one they go down. I think I agree. They've appointed a physio as their manager. I think that's going to backfire. I think they're going to finish bottom. I've got the Graafschap finishing second bottom. I think overall their squad's just not good enough. I don't think Henk de Jong's that good a manager that he can work miracles with anything that he's got in front of him. I think they're just going to lack a bit of quality all round. And the big worry for me is they've got Hedy Jurhuis in goal. I mean, you only need to see what he did for Roda JC last year to know that he's not going to be too reliable between the posts. And I think that's, for any promoted team, what they need is reliability in goal, and I don't think they've got that. And I've also gone, I think this year there's 7 or 8 teams that could be dragged into any sort of relegation battle. Willem II, if they lose Franso up front, they could be dragged into it. VVV have lost their 2 best players. They could be dragged into but I've gone for NSA Breda finishing 16th. I think, as I said earlier, I don't think their loans from Manchester City are of top quality. They don't really have a striker. They got Mitchell Tavreda up front. I don't think he's good enough for you know, a team that's going to be not struggling at the bottom. I don't think he's the one that's going to take them by the scruff of the neck and lead them. And I think with the teams down there being so close together, I think they might just get sucked into 16th, which will be a bit of a surprise. But I think you saw last year what can happen with FC20 getting dragged into it and going down. Anybody can really go down if they're not good enough, and I think it's going to be very, very tight this year.
Again, Michael, James, really enjoyed those opinions there. I think Excelsior will survive again. We always say it every season, Mike. I feel like you sound like a broken record now. You say it every season. This is the year Excelsior go down. You do.
1 year it'll happen, 1 year.
1 year you'll be right, but I don't think it'll be this year. I think
the year that you don't predict it is the year it happens.
and that well, yeah, I just think they'll stay up again. I think they just have that little bit that will just keep them up. A very small club, but there's just a lot of comfort around the club, and knowing that they have that confidence to stay up. All the players that have signed have said, this is a club that does compete at Eredivisie level. This is a club that is an Eredivisie-sized club now, and they know that they're comfortable with the players that are around. Some good signings from other clubs in the Eredivisie. Yeah, I just think they'll be fine again. But we'll see what happens. It's interesting how Heracles have been mentioned to finish in the bottom three. Who was it that said that? Was it you, James?
I said it. Yeah, I think they'll finish in the I think they'll finish in the last relegation playoff place. Maybe by virtue of 1 point or goal difference. I think Heracles. I think they're trying to be smart by looking elsewhere, but the answer is right in front of them. I mean, if you look at the Jupiler League, the Dutch First Division, or the Keukenkampioen Division as it's called in the sponsor sense this season, you've got Jon Stegeman at Go Ahead Eagles, you've got Jack de Gier at NSC Nijmegen. They're good managers. I think why have they not been looked at? I'm sure that Maurice Stijn as well had the opportunity. I'm sure he had the opportunity to leave VVV, but he wasn't necessarily convinced by a club that come in for them. I think Heracles are just trying to be a little bit too smart, and I think it's going to backfire. I mean, the manager himself, Frank Wilmoth, has stated how quickly he has to learn Dutch to be able to communicate with his players and the fans and everyone involved in the club. And having learnt the language from scratch, it's not an easy task. It took me a long time, and it may well take him a long time as well. So I think that they're going to struggle. I don't think they're going to get whooped every week, but I don't think they're going to accumulate enough points to be able to pull away from the relegation playoff places.
And a fair point. The manager for me isn't the only issue with Heracles, and I have him down as finishing 16th. And of course, all three of us are only guessing here. We don't know for sure. It could be 1 or 2 points in it the whole way down the bottom half of the table. Who knows? But I'm just looking at their signings, and I spoke about this earlier in the summer. Signing players to the German third division won't keep them in the Eredivisie. It's not the level that the Dutch Eredivisie pitched at. Blažević, the goalkeeper, Rosman, the defender, Sammer, another defender, Sibora is a left back from Schalke's reserve team. Merkel, he's a signing from the Austrian league, but again, the bottom of the Austrian league. We'll soon see what happens with the likes of Dalmau, who is a 24-year-old striker from Villarreal's reserve team. We all know the story that happened with Willem II and Frans Sol, one of the best players in the Dutch Eredivisie last season. He could surprise. The same with Sylvester van der Voorten. I think a 20-year-old coming from Almere City, there to replace Brandy Kuvas, who, by the way, hasn't left yet and could yet change her mind on whether Heracles stay up, because a player of Kuvas' quality could be the one to make the difference. But you could see 1 or 2 signings really surprise and take the Eredivisie by storm. But by and large, I don't think that'll be the case. And they've actually been stripping away at their resources for many, many years now, Heracles, for the past 10 years, I'd say. They don't have that 4 or 5 quality players that really keep them pushing at the top half of the table. I'll happily eat my hat if they finish top half, but I really don't think so. And I think this will be a season that they really struggle.
They won't be finishing top half. I can tell you that for I can tell you that for nothing. They will not be finishing top half.
I like. I really like Sylvester van der Water. I think he's going to be a very good signing. He was great for Almere City in the games I watched him. He's tall, he's fast, he scores goals, and if he managed to keep, I guess you're right, Michael. It's all about Kuas. If he stays, then out of all the teams in the bottom half, he's the only one that's got that bit of spark that can do something out of nothing. He can score goals from anywhere on the pitch. I mean, I think you've seen it for Heracles. He scores from nearly the halfway line sometimes with his free kicks. I think if he stays, he can score goals out of nothing, and that makes a difference for a team like Heracles. I think if you've got a front three, if you've got QS on the right, Van der Water on the left, then you've got, Dalmau, if he is another Fransol, he's come from Villarreal reserves. He could be anything. He could be great. And they've also got Vincent Vermeij, he's a good target man. I can't see them getting relegated because I think they've got goals. If those 3-4 players stay, if QS stays, I think they'll be fine. But I think if he goes before the end of the transfer window, that's when it changes into a big issue.
And as we said already, that FC Twente went down last season and they had Asaidi, Fredrik Jensen, players of high quality in attack, and you just have to see that over the whole course of the season whether the squad is strong enough. 3 teams we haven't mentioned yet so far, have been keeping count, are ADO Den Haag, Willem II and VVV Venlo. I think let's start with VVV just quickly towards the end of this podcast. I've gotten down as 15th to just about stay up. I think Maurice Stein, the manager, fantastic bloke. James has met him. He's a great man. He will keep that team up again, but I think it'll be a massive fight to do that again. They've got Jairo Hot on loan from Leeds. They've got Samuelson on loan from West Ham. 2 players that need to replace the goals that have left the club through Lennart T and Vito van Krooi. Have they got enough to stay up? I'm guessing, as neither of you put the VVV in your bottom 3, you think they do?
They will have enough to stay up. I think this is very telling in the 5th year of Maurice Stein. How I remember watching a different interview to the one I did with him, where he said that he often weighed up and thought about how would the squad respond going into the 5th year, and I think it's going to be very interesting. They've also signed Van Ooyen from Heracles, who's an experienced centre back, which will help them. I think with the nous that Maurice Stein has, I think they'll stay up. I also agree, Michael, it's not going to be as easy as what people think it's going to be. I think they may well finish around maybe 13th, 14th mark perhaps, and it might not be. I don't think there'll be a huge gap between the final relegation place and who stays up without any difficulty. As we know through commenting on this league for many years with the 3 of us, that the relegation always goes to the final day. It's very rarely is it settled before the final day. And having spoke to the likes of Fabian Spogskleder for Football-Oranje last year, when he was telling me, I spoke to him whilst I was in the relegation battle, and he said, we was always hoping, and the biggest ambition is to get safe as soon as possible. But I think they'll be okay. But I'm very intrigued as to how the team responds going into Maurice Stein's 5th year.
I've got them down as just outside the relegation playoffs. They could easily get dragged into it for me. Grot up front, he's had a horrible year at Leeds. If he doesn't score the goals, they've lost, as I said with Kuas, he was Heracles' spark. They lost their spark, Clint Lemans, who scored so many goals. He can score like 3, 4, 5 free kicks a year. That's like cheap goals. They don't really have that anymore. Van Krooi as well was their other great attacker, and I think they've lost basically their 3 best players this year. The striker as well, who's gone back to Germany, Ty. It's all about replacing them. They've got Grot, they've got Martin Samuelson from West Ham United. We'll see how good he is. But I think they'll be a lot closer down the bottom this year. If they stay up, then Stein's done a great job.
And finally, ADO Den Haag and Willem II, I have them down as 9th and 10th respectively. Are we all in agreement, the 3 of us, that they'll be mid-table? I personally think that ADO will be struggling to replace Bjorn Jansson's 19 goals he got last season. Nearly got the Eredivisie Golden Boot. But they have an average team. But Alfons Groenendijk is just a good manager. And he's that type of manager that will go for those results. He will get more wins than draws. and because of that, they will have more points towards the end of the season. Hence why I've put them as 9th. Willem II 10th. Some interesting signings. They've kept Fransol, a goal scorer, and they've added a couple of interesting players. I've got Pobianch from Wisla Krakow, the Polish side. Apparently the N'Golo Kante of the Polish league. And a Kanak, a 19-year-old forward from Bayern Leverkusen, who's going to be in our top 50 under-21s to watch in the new season, which will be out on Football-Oranje this week. Keep your eyes peeled. I just think 2 teams that'll be solid mid-table.
Last summer, I predicted ADO Den Haag to be my surprise team of the season. To some ridicule on Twitter, I think one person said it was daydreaming, and they've managed to finish in the European places. But this year, I can see them struggling. I think Jonsson was such a big part of their squad last year. They're trying to go for Henk Veerman, who is another target man striker. We'll see if they get him before the transfer window ends. They've got Zhang Yuning, the West Brom striker who played for Vitesse on loan. He wasn't that great at Vitesse. I mean, it was a shock to me when he got signed by West Brom for 10 million. I thought that was very strange because he didn't really seem to be a top quality striker. Then he went to Werder Bremen, didn't play a game, and now he's back in the Eredivisie. We'll see how he does. I think they've lost their quality player. We'll see how they do this year. I've got them down as I think 13th this year. I can't see them being as good as they were last year.
As regards to ADO Den Haag, I think they'll be fine. I think Michael makes very good points about, in particular, Groenendijk. I think he's relishing being back, managing the club he once played for. I think ADO will finish around about mid-table, possibly 10th or 11th. I think the same goes for Willem II as well, but I really do think that Willem II missed a trick in appointing perhaps a Jack de Geer or a Maurice Stijn. I think to appoint Adrie Costa, who's been around a bit at Club Brugge, for example. I think he was the assistant at Willem II 30 years prior to this. They were hounded out Van der Looy because they wasn't happy with the results, and they had aspirations of European football and being in the mix in the European playoffs when they were down in 15th position. I think they need a bit of a reality check, and I can't see them making that much progress under Adrie Costa, to be honest.
I think with the relegation, as I said earlier, it'll be so tight. One bold prediction I'm going to make for this season is there's going to be an absolute hammering. One of these teams is going to get hammered by one of the top 3. I think there's a possibility there'll be a double figure win, I think, this season. That's my one prediction. I think it'll be a 10-0, 11-0 win. It might not happen, but I think there's got to be a few teams at the bottom that are going to be well off the pace, I think.
Like the 10-0 win like PSV Feyenoord in 2011, I think it was, in Eindhoven.
I hope that Feyenoord fans have turned off the podcast so they don't have to hear that.
No, I'd like to think, being based in Amsterdam and doing this pod with you guys for nigh on 3 years now, Feyenoord's supporters will know that I am completely neutral and non-biased, and I have received very little criticism from Feyenoord fans on Twitter, which is very nice. And I think with my prediction of them coming second, that they will hold their finger in terms of any potential criticism that they want to bring my way.
Oh, if I ever get criticism on Twitter, it's always from a Feyenoord fan. I tell you that now. We should wrap up this podcast. It's been great, guys. We have a couple of questions, actually. We just want to wrap up. Klaas asks, is the youth talent influx towards Premier League clubs positive or negative? Why? And if it is negative, how would you try to prevent it? We answer this question fairly often in this podcast. So would one of you guys like to give us a quick answer on that one?
Negative. I think there's too many examples now of players that they go and then they end up back at clubs. I've talked about Groot at VVV. I mean, he left NSA for Leeds. Wasn't good enough, now he's back. Go look at the summer. Dilro's son he left Manchester City for Hertha Berlin. Congolo is back at Heerenveen. I think there's too many examples now of players going at a young age. Daniel Malen as well, PSV from Arsenal. There's only 1 or 2 now that are actually still in the English academies, and are they going to get a chance at the first team? Probably not. You think the best chance would be, a Chong at Manchester United, but even then he plays for Manchester United in pre-season, and Marino says that he's not going to get much game time for the first team. And Fosu Mensah as well, he seems to be on his way out again. Hertha Berlin linked. And Raydan, we'll see what he does at Chelsea, but they've also got a new manager who's got aspirations this season. Is really going to give 17-year-olds a chance? I don't think so. So I think the way you prevent it is by sitting down with these players and going, look, this is what happens when they reach the first team, or these players at Ajax. 17, 18-year-olds to come through, De Ligt, Van de Beek, Frankie de Jong, and what's going to happen with them over the next few years. Are going to go on moves to Bayern Munich's first team, Barcelona's first team, and actually play. They've just got to stick it out, and they've got to realise that money isn't the way, and the Premier League isn't what it's all cracked up to be, I think.
If I can just elaborate on Mike's point, I interviewed new Manchester City player Philip Sandler back in March, and he told me that he didn't think that the move to Manchester City would come so quickly. He only thought that the club were keeping tabs on him, and when the scouts and when the transfer network of people came to speak to him, they really sold the club to him. And he thought, this is where I have to be. They told him about the ins and outs of being on a training pitch with Sergio Aguero every day of the week. And this is what helped sway Sandler's decision. So I can understand Mike's points, but I think with the persuasive nature of some clubs and having spoken to players who have been involved in that, some players can lay, some scouts can lay it on thick where, all the bright lights are promised, and then when they physically get there, it turns out not to be the case.
Yeah, I would be absolutely amazed. Judging by Sanders' form at the end of last season, I'd be amazed if he makes his debut for Manchester City. I think he's one of these players that, Chelsea do it. They sign youngsters, loan them out for a few years, they make a big profit, and I think that's what Manchester City are doing with Sander.
I asked him as well, Mike. I said, what other Eredivisie clubs did they come in? He said, yes. He said, other Eredivisie clubs come in, but they sold it to me. They really told me what they planned to do with me. And, I thought it was very, very interesting indeed.
There must be something in him, but considering his age already, he's not going to become a Man City standard player. Sandler's a good player, don't get me wrong, but he's not Manchester City level. It will be interesting to see how he gets on. But I think the main issue with these kind of players is that they see examples of players that may have gone abroad and done well. But the best case is to keep players in the Netherlands, develop them there, and then use those as positive examples to the likes of Redan, who has gone to Chelsea and does seem to be doing well already at youth level. Whereas those in the Netherlands do get the games to impress. If Redan was playing in the Netherlands with Ajax still, I'm pretty sure he'd be around the first team with Ajax, or playing the second team in the Dutch second division, or maybe even on loan somewhere else in the division. But he's not getting those senior games. He's getting to play against youth players who aren't as strong, who aren't maybe as quick. I've got 2 more questions to go before we end this week's podcast. Oh yeah, so Alex asked about the best transfers that have been made by Eredivisie clubs. I hope we've covered that enough in this podcast. And finally from Cam, final question of today: what would be best for an Eredivisie team or the league? So making the round of 16 in the Champions League, or getting to Europa League final again, just like Ajax did. Curious to hear your response. Before the podcast, I answered this quickly to you both, and I said, if you had said the Champions League quarter-final or Europa League final, I would have picked the Champions League quarter-final. I think last 16 is great to get out of a Champions League group. The money's also brilliant for the club, but I'd rather have the Europa League final over that because of the occasion that it is, a European final. But I think if you get to the Champions League quarter-final, semi-final, it's certainly worth being in that competition because of the money, because of a Dutch coefficient as well. It'd be great for the league in that respect too.
I agree, Michael. I would say Europa League final. Living in a city, living in Amsterdam when Ajax reached that final, that day of that final was like a national holiday. Buses, metros, everybody on the streets, everybody young and old were all wearing Ajax shirts. Everybody was so proud. The whole of the Netherlands, for example, and the Amsterdam police even sent text messages to people saying, don't come to Amsterdam, Amsterdam is completely rammed. And it was a tremendous achievement from a very, very young team under the guidance of a very good manager in Peter Bos. You see how much the Europa League means to the Netherlands is not a small nation, but to give you an example of nations like Croatia, for example, and Norway and Switzerland, how the smaller nations are really embracing the Europa League and trying to get in at the cost of come or by hook or by crook. I think it would be great for the coefficient, as you say. Vitesse have a difficult task in entertaining Basel in the second leg, being in Switzerland, for them to reach the Europa League group phase. But we hold hope that they'll be able to do it, and the same goes for Feyenoord. Ajax are assured of a place in the Europa League, so it'll be interesting to see how they get on. But the draw and potential opponents, it dictates an awful lot in terms of the rhythm and in terms of when games are played. So I would choose the Europa League final for the occasion and what it will do for the coefficient of the country too.
It's an interesting question, but you've got to also factor in that both have happened recently. Ajax got to Europa League final and PSV got out of a group in the Champions League a couple of years ago, and both really haven't helped Dutch football going forward. I mean, the coefficient is still where it is; it keeps going down. I think you've got to take a final every day of the week because of the chance of winning it. I think it'd be a huge story in modern football now for a Dutch club to win a trophy, and you've got to try and take that any chance you can get. I can't see a Dutch team reaching the Champions League final anytime soon. The Europa League's the one that you kind of hope for. You think PSV and Ajax both have squads, Feyenoord as well, that are capable of doing it. And hopefully over the next 5 to 10 years we see a Dutch team lifting the trophy once again.
Lovely answers, guys. And thank you for a bumper-packed hour-long podcast this week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.